the day the sky turned against him. November 2nd, 1944, was not supposed to be remarkable. For First Lieutenant Bruce Ward Carr, it was meant to be just another combat sortie in a war already filled with danger. The mission was routine by late war standards, low-level strafing against German airfields deep inside occupied Czechoslovakia. By 1944, Carr had flown dozens of missions, survived aerial dogfights, and earned a reputation for aggressive flying. Yet war does not reward experience with mercy. At precisely 3:47 p.m., everything changed. As Carr pulled his P-51 Mustang out of a strafing run, his eyes flicked instinctively to the engine gauges. The oil pressure needle was falling, fast. Within seconds it hit zero. Thick black smoke poured from the aircraft's nose, trailing behind him like a funeral banner. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, one of the most powerful and refined piston engines ever built, screamed in protest as metal ground against metal. Carr knew the truth immediately. Without oil, the engine would seize in under 90 seconds. When that happened, the spinning propeller would become dead weight, transforming his fighter into an unpowered glider over enemy territory. The cause was obvious. German anti-aircraft fire had found its mark. A fragment from an 88mm shell had punched through the engine compartment, slicing the oil line clean open. Carr had no illusion of limping home. He was more than 200 miles from Allied lines, flying over hostile ground filled with German troops, radar stations, and flak batteries. He calculated his options in seconds. There were none. Staying in the aircraft meant certain death. With the calm decisiveness that separated combat veterans from novices, Carr popped the canopy, rolled the Mustang inverted, and dropped into the freezing air. The aircraft roared past him, engine screaming its last moments of life, before vanishing into the clouds. At roughly 8,000 feet, his parachute snapped open, jerking his body violently and stealing his breath. Below him stretched enemy territory in every direction. Forests, fields, villages, and roads controlled by a military machine that had perfected the art of capture. As Carr descended, the reality of his situation settled in. He was alone, injured, and surrounded. When he hit the ground, the landing was brutal. His parachute snagged branches, twisting his body, and he struck the frozen soil hard enough to wrench his ankle. Pain flared up his leg, sharp and immediate. It was not broken, but he knew it would slow him down. He did not waste time. Years of training took over. Carr gathered the silk canopy, dragged it into the undergrowth, and buried it beneath leaves and dirt. A visible parachute was a death sentence. German patrols would be searching within minutes. Carr checked his equipment. He had no radio, no survival kit worth mentioning, no food or water. His only weapon was a .45 caliber pistol with 7 rounds, hardly reassuring odds against an army. November in Central Europe was unforgiving. Daytime temperatures were cold, nights dropped below freezing. He wore a flight suit designed for altitude, not for prolonged survival on the ground. The mathematics of survival were brutal and well known among Allied airmen. Pilots shot down over occupied territory had less than a 1 in 4 chance of evading capture and returning home. The rest spent the war in prisoner camps or vanished into unmarked graves. Carr understood these numbers. He had escorted bombers filled with men who never returned. He had seen parachutes that never opened. As dusk approached, Carr faced his first real decision. Most downed pilots ran immediately toward Allied lines, moving south or west, following instinct and hope. The Germans knew this. Their patrols were trained to anticipate it. Carr, however, had never been particularly interested in doing what was expected. He studied the terrain, listened to distant engine noise from the airfield he had attacked, and made a choice that defied logic. Instead of fleeing away from danger, he would move toward it. North, toward the German airfield itself. The reasoning was cold, calculated, and risky. German forces would search outward from his landing site, assuming he was trying to escape. They would not expect him to move closer to their own base. More importantly, an airfield meant supplies, food, water, shelter, and possibly opportunity. As night fell, Carr disappeared into the forest. He stayed off roads, avoided open ground, and moved slowly, favoring his injured ankle. Every sound became a threat. Every snapping branch could mean discovery. Hunger gnawed at him, but fear sharpened his focus. Carr had survived dogfights at 400 miles per hour, flown through flak bursts that turned the sky into shrapnel, and led attacks against superior numbers. This, he told himself, was just another problem, one that required patience rather than firepower. Somewhere behind him, German search parties were already mobilizing. Somewhere ahead, a fully operational Luftwaffe airfield waited in the darkness. Bruce Carr did not yet know that within 4 days he would do something no Allied pilot had ever done before. For now, survival was enough. 4 days behind enemy lines. The first night tested Bruce Carr in ways aerial combat never had. In the air, danger was fast and decisive, seconds of violence followed by resolution. On the ground, fear stretched endlessly. Every step through the dark forest sent pain shooting through his injured ankle. The cold seeped through his flight suit, settling into his bones. Carr moved slowly, deliberately, stopping often to listen. German patrols were methodical, their voices occasionally carrying through the trees, sharp and confident. He learned quickly that movement during daylight was suicide. When the sky lightened, Carr found cover beneath dense undergrowth and remained motionless for hours, conserving energy and willpower. Hunger began almost immediately. His last meal had been before the mission, and now his body demanded fuel he did not have. By the second day, thirst became as dangerous as enemy soldiers. Carr located a narrow stream cutting through the forest and drank cautiously, aware that water could be contaminated but knowing he had no alternative. The cold numbed his throat and stomach. Not long after, he spotted a German patrol moving less than 200 yards away. Soldiers with rifles scanned the terrain while dogs pulled at their leashes. Carr flattened himself into a shallow ditch, barely breathing, heart pounding loud enough that he was certain it would give him away. He remained there for more than 2 hours as the patrol passed and eventually disappeared. Only then did he move again. Each night he advanced a little closer to the airfield, navigating by stars and distant sounds of engines and generators. By the third day, exhaustion began to cloud his judgment. Carr had burned thousands of calories simply staying warm and moving carefully. His body, deprived of food, began consuming itself. Muscles weakened, reflexes slowed, and the sharp clarity he depended on dulled around the edges. The ankle throbbed constantly, swollen and stiff. He knew the signs. He had briefed pilots who had gone down before. Survival was not heroic, it was mechanical. Eat, drink, move, hide. Carr could no longer do 2 of those 4 things. For the first time, surrender seemed not just reasonable, but inevitable. Captured Allied pilots often spoke of the Luftwaffe differently than other branches of the German military. Aviators respected aviators. Prisoner-of-war camps like Stalag Luft III were harsh but structured. There were rules, Red Cross parcels, letters from home. Compared to freezing in a forest and slowly starving, captivity offered life. Carr weighed the decision carefully. He did not fear imprisonment. He feared dying anonymously, unseen and forgotten. By nightfall of the 3rd day, he had made up his mind. At dawn, he would surrender. Late on the 4th afternoon, Carr reached the edge of the German airfield. He climbed carefully into a tree line overlooking the perimeter and observed. What he saw surprised him. The base was active but not heavily guarded. Aircraft sat in revetments, partially concealed by camouflage netting. Fuel trucks moved slowly across the field. Mechanics worked under portable lights. Carr watched, counting movements, memorizing routines. He was no longer thinking like an escaped pilot. He was thinking like a tactician. That instinct, ingrained through years of combat flying, refused to shut off. Then he saw it. An Focke-Wulf FW190 sat in a nearby revetment, closer than the others. 2 German mechanics worked methodically around it, checking panels, fuel levels, and control surfaces. Carr watched as they ran up the engine. The deep, aggressive roar of the BMW 801 radial engine shattered the quiet evening air. Even from a distance, Carr could feel the power in that sound. This was not an aircraft under repair. It was ready to fly. After completing their checks, the mechanics shut down the engine, covered the cockpit, and walked away toward the hangars. The FW190 was left alone. Carr's surrender plan dissolved in an instant. His mind raced, not with panic, but calculation. He had never flown a German aircraft. He did not speak German. He did not know the cockpit layout, the startup procedure, or the emergency systems. But he understood flight. Aerodynamics did not change with language. Every fighter aircraft, regardless of nation, relied on the same fundamentals: throttle, stick, rudder, airspeed, lift. Carr had logged over 500 hours in combat. He had flown damaged aircraft home with half their controls shot away. This was not bravery, it was probability. A dangerous probability, but one he could influence. He waited until deep night. Around 3 a.m., the airfield settled into silence. Only a skeleton crew remained on duty. No vehicles passed near the revetment. Carr slid down from his hiding place and studied the open ground between him and the aircraft. 80 yards. No cover. If spotted, he would be shot on sight. He moved anyway. Low. Fast. Ignoring the pain screaming from his ankle. 40 seconds later, he was at the aircraft. Up close, the FW190 looked even more formidable. It was heavier and more compact than the P-51, built for brutal power rather than elegance. The armored cockpit glass reflected the moonlight. Carr climbed onto the wing and found the canopy unlocked. He slid it back and dropped into the cockpit. Immediately, disorientation hit him. Every label, every gauge, every switch was written in German Gothic script. The cockpit was cramped. His knees pressed against the instrument panel. Yet some things felt familiar. The control stick rested naturally in his hand. The throttle sat on the left. Certain instincts transcended nationality. Carr had only hours before sunrise. He used every second. He traced wires, followed control linkages, and identified instruments by position and behavior rather than language. Airspeed indicators, altimeters, engine gauges. Pilots learned their patterns instinctively. The biggest unknown was the engine start. American fighters used electrical starters. The FW190 did not. On the right side of the cockpit, Carr found a T-shaped handle with unfamiliar text. He pulled it. Nothing. He pushed it. A mechanical whine filled the cockpit, the inertia starter spinning up. Understanding dawned. He let it win longer, then pulled again. The engine exploded into life. The sound was thunderous. The BMW 801 roared like a living thing, shaking the aircraft. Carr froze for half a second, listening. Shouts erupted across the airfield. Lights snapped on. He had no more time. The gamble was committed. A stolen fighter and the flight through hell. The moment the BMW 801 engine came alive, Bruce Carr's world became chaos. The FW190 trembled beneath him, its radial heart thundering so violently he could feel the vibrations in every bone. Outside, the German airfield erupted into activity. Mechanics shouted, soldiers ran, and flashlight beams cut through the darkness. Every second counted. Carr, though untrained on this aircraft, acted on instinct. He shoved the throttle forward. The nose lifted almost immediately. The aircraft surged down the revetment strip, the taillight scraping the earth for a heartbeat before lifting entirely. Hangars loomed on either side. There was no time to calculate runway length, no opportunity to confirm flap positions, no radio to call in clearance. One mistake would be fatal. Yet Carr had survived impossible odds before, and he knew fear could not control action, only precision and courage. As he cleared the hangars, the FW190 leapt into the night sky. Moonlight reflected off the wing's aluminum skin, streaking past trees and earth at a speed that blurred Carr's vision. He was airborne in a fully fueled, enemy fighter aircraft, 200 meters behind enemy lines, and every German on the field could see and hear him. His hands gripped the stick, muscles taut, eyes scanning the unfamiliar instrument panel. The cockpit was a labyrinth of dials, switches, and gauges he could not read, yet Carr trusted what he knew. The aircraft flew according to physics, not language. Throttle forward, sticks slightly back, rudder coordination, airspeed awareness. These were universal truths of flight. Centuries of aerodynamics, theory, and muscle memory converged in his mind. Immediately, he faced a critical problem: altitude. Too high, and German radar stations and anti-aircraft batteries would spot him. Too low, and any error meant collision with trees or buildings. Carr chose treetop level, roughly 50 feet above the ground, moving west-southwest toward France and Allied territory. The forest below became a green blur, a chaotic tapestry of shadows and moonlight. Every bump in the terrain threatened the landing gear or wing edges. The FW190, heavier than the P-51 and nose-heavy, responded differently than any aircraft Carr had flown. Yet, he adapted in real time. Adjustments were instinctual, learned through hundreds of combat hours dodging Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs in the air. His body knew what to do before his conscious mind processed the danger. Minutes stretched into a relentless symphony of sound and risk. German flares burst in the distance, soldiers shouted from trenches, and engines of other aircraft hummed across the horizon. Carr's flight was no longer about distance. It was about survival, maneuvering an unfamiliar, powerful fighter through enemy territory at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. He maintained control by focusing on fundamentals: airspeed, angle of attack, visual horizon. Every correction required immediate judgment. Too much rudder could spin the aircraft. Too little, and he risked hitting the forest canopy. The tension was constant, physical, mental, and visceral. Sweat poured beneath his flight suit, mixed with the cold of November air. Yet he pressed on, because surrender had never been part of his equation. As the pre-dawn sky began to pale, the terrain slowly shifted. Forest gave way to farmland, then to the scarred battlefields of eastern France. Here, danger transformed. Allied forces controlled some sectors, but communications were limited. As Carr approached friendly lines, American anti-aircraft gunners identified him as a German aircraft. Tracers sliced the sky around him, bullets embedding themselves into earth and foliage. Every gun in the area seemed trained on his position. He had no radio, no signal panels, no means to identify himself as an American pilot. The FW190's markings, a swastika on the tail, crosses on the wings, sealed his apparent identity in enemy colors. This was the final test: treachery from both sides. Carr dove lower, skimming fields and hedgerows at 20 feet, creating turbulence and dust to obscure his trajectory. Civilians ducked into ditches as he screamed overhead. American soldiers fired rifles at him, tracing him with mortars, machine guns, and small arms. Every shot was a potential fatal mistake. Carr did not panic. He relied on skill and instinct. The aircraft's gauges and engine responses guided him as much as visual observation. Tracer rounds passed near the canopy, leaving small scars on aluminum but missing Carr's body. The FW190 absorbed punishment, demonstrating the craftsmanship of German engineering: a robust radial engine, reinforced airframe, and resilient hydraulics. Carr's mind raced through options. Every maneuver had to serve two purposes: avoid destruction and maintain a course toward the 354th Fighter Group's airfield at A66, Conny, France. Within minutes, he had crossed the front line, and the landscape of familiar airstrips, hangars, and control towers emerged. Approaching the field, another crisis manifested. The landing gear, never tested in real time under stress, refused to deploy. Carr tried the standard lever. Nothing. Hydraulic pressure systems were unknown to him. Every second increased the chance of a catastrophic belly landing. The 40mm anti-aircraft batteries at the airfield had already begun tracking him, preparing to fire at what they assumed was an enemy fighter on a low approach. There was no time for manuals, no time for trial and error. Carr's decision-making had to be instantaneous. He opted for a controlled crash, a belly landing on a stretch of grass beside the main runway. He lowered the flaps, cut throttle, and guided the plane down. The aircraft hit the earth at 90 miles per hour, sliding across mud and debris for 300 yards. Trees and uneven terrain threatened to flip the fighter, yet the FW190 held. When the sliding ceased, Carr, covered in mud, was alive. Seconds later, chaos erupted around him. Military police rushed forward, rifles trained. The canopy slid open, revealing a mud-splattered American in a torn flight suit. "I'm Captain Carr of this squadron," he yelled. No one believed it. Missing for 4 days, presumed dead or captured, he had returned in a fully operational enemy fighter. The commanding officer arrived, assessing the improbable scene: the intact stolen fighter, the survival of the pilot, the stunned MPs. "Where in the hell have you been? And what have you been doing now?" he demanded. Carr's answer was simple: survival through action, audacity, and instinct. Word of the stolen FW190, the daring flight through enemy territory, and the impossible belly landing spread quickly, creating a legend that would endure for decades. Aces, strategy, and skybound calculations. The stolen Focke-Wulf incident did not end Bruce Carr's career, it transformed it. The daring feat became a defining moment, a study in audacity and improvisation that spread through the ranks of the United States Army Air Forces like wildfire. Carr returned to active combat missions with a reputation that preceded him. His squadron, the 354th Fighter Group, watched in awe as the young pilot, barely 20 years old, flew with a calculated recklessness that made ordinary maneuvers seem tame. The P-51 Mustang, his trusted aircraft, became an extension of his instinctual command. Every mission demanded precision. Altitude, airspeed, fuel management, enemy behavior, and weather patterns all collided in the cockpit, requiring a mind capable of instant calculations while under immense pressure. Carr's skills were no longer just technical, they had become predictive. He anticipated enemy maneuvers, gauged the psychological state of German pilots, and executed flights that defied conventional tactical wisdom. April 2, 1945, would cement his legend. Leading a flight of 4 P-51s on a reconnaissance mission over Germany, Carr encountered a formation of enemy fighters unlike any he had seen before. Stacked from 18,000 to 25,000 feet, the Luftwaffe had assembled approximately 60 aircraft, a mixture of Bf-109G-10S and FW-190D-9S, each flown by relatively fresh pilots, but in a configuration that presented overwhelming positional advantage. Standard military doctrine dictated immediate evasion, for against 60 was suicide. Retreat, report, survive. Every manual, every experienced advisor, every historical precedent pointed to the same conclusion. Carr, however, thrived on defying the predictable. He keyed his radio, engaging. His wingmen, seasoned veterans who had flown with him for months, trusted implicitly that when Carr said engage, it meant not retreat but attack. The 4 P-51s climbed into the formation, a counterintuitive strategy that capitalized on confusion and surprise. Carr's approach relied on rapid target assessment and disciplined gunnery. He moved through the mass of German fighters like a predator among prey. The first target, a Bf-109, was completely unaware of his presence until tracer rounds shredded its fuselage. The pilot never had a chance to react. Carr shifted immediately to an FW-190, precise bursts of .50 caliber fire designed to disable rather than waste ammunition. Within minutes, 3 enemy aircraft plummeted in flames, explosions marking the sky like fireworks in reverse. The German formation, unprepared for direct assault, began scattering, unsure of the number of attacking forces or the origin of the incoming fire. Carr's instincts, sharpened through years of combat, allowed him to exploit confusion, moving from one target to the next with relentless efficiency. The resulting chaos was calculated, not reckless, a testament to his unique understanding of aerial combat dynamics. The engagement concluded with extraordinary results. For American pilots, Carr included, destroyed 15 German aircraft, with 0 losses on their side. Carr's contribution, personally responsible for 5 kills, highlighted the rare combination of tactical audacity and operational control. His actions earned immediate recognition. On April 9, 1945, he was promoted to captain, a rapid acknowledgement of leadership and skill. The Distinguished Service Cross followed, the second highest award for valor in the U.S. military, awarded specifically for the April 2 engagement. The citation noted, completely disregarding his personal safety and the enemy's overwhelming numerical superiority and tactical advantage of altitude, he led his element in a direct attack on the hostile force, personally destroying 5 enemy aircraft and damaging still another. Carr's name became synonymous with courage and ingenuity. He was now, officially, the last ace in a day in the European theater of World War II, a title that would remain unmatched before Germany surrendered. The post-war period did not diminish Carr's drive for flight mastery. With the end of World War II, he transitioned seamlessly into the emerging era of jet aviation. Joining the Acrojets, America's first jet aerobatic demonstration team, Carr flew F-80 Shooting Stars, translating combat acumen into precision aerobatics. Korea followed, where he flew 57 combat missions in F-86 Sabres with the 336th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, later commanding the squadron from 1955 to 1956 as a colonel. Vietnam brought new challenges in entirely new aircraft, F-100 Super Sabres. Over the course of 3 wars, Carr accumulated a total of 505 team combat missions, an extraordinary testament to adaptability and mastery across generations of aviation technology. Each aircraft, each mission, demanded not only skill but strategic thinking under life-threatening conditions. The psychological and physical strain mirrored the 4 days behind enemy lines, only now magnified by the stakes of advanced combat aircraft and mass aerial operations. Carr's philosophy of flight and decision-making extended beyond technical skill. He viewed every challenge as a question, what else can I do? This mentality informed every maneuver, every engagement, every decision under duress. It was not recklessness but calculated risk, the ability to see beyond conventional options, to transform limited circumstances into opportunities. The stolen FW190 incident encapsulated this approach. A young pilot, alone, unarmed, injured, and trapped behind enemy lines, identified the possibility to turn the situation to his advantage. For months later, facing 60 enemy fighters with only 3 wingmen, he repeated the same mental calculus on a massive scale. In both cases, Carr challenged the assumptions of risk and reward, the fundamental rules of engagement, and emerged victorious. Even late in life, Carr retained this spirit. In 1997, invited to Florida's Fantasy of Flight Museum, he flew a P-51D Mustang at 73 years old. The crowd watched as a septuagenarian pilot executed loops, rolls, and high-G maneuvers that would challenge pilots half his age. When asked about his thought process, Carr's response was revealing in its simplicity. What's the airplane capable of? What am I capable of? Let's find out. This philosophy, applied to life as much as flight, underpinned a career that spanned 3 wars, 3 aircraft generations, and hundreds of combat missions. Carr's story, preserved in military records and legend alike, reflected not only technical skill but a profound understanding of human potential under extreme circumstances. The legacy of a pilot beyond limits. Bruce Carr's life after combat was a study in both continuity and evolution. The world of aviation had changed, yet his approach to it remained consistent. Relentless curiosity, audacity tempered by skill, and an unflinching commitment to mastering every challenge. Retiring in 1973 after nearly 3 decades of service, 505 total team combat missions, and leadership roles spanning multiple conflicts, Carr's uniform bore the evidence of a life defined by excellence. His chest displayed the Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross with clusters, Air Medal with clusters, and Purple Heart. These honors, while extraordinary, captured only a fraction of what Carr achieved. They chronicled bravery in quantifiable terms, but omitted the full story. The stolen FW190 flight behind enemy lines, the treetop-level evasion of both German and Allied gunfire, and the extraordinary decision-making that saved countless lives and changed the narrative of American aerial warfare. These untold moments, hidden from official record yet immortalized in oral histories and eyewitness accounts, defined the true essence of Bruce Carr. He had been, in effect, a living paradox, simultaneously a risk-taker and a precise technician, a rebel and a strategist, an individual whose actions seemed to defy logic yet adhered strictly to the principles of physics, instinct, and human ingenuity. Beyond military service, Carr's contribution to aviation extended into mentorship and demonstration. The Acrojets, America's first jet aerobatic team, became his playground for innovation and teaching. Through rigorous routines, he illustrated principles of aerodynamics, precision, and split-second decision-making to a generation of pilots entering the jet age. Every maneuver carried a lesson. Loops and rolls were not for show, but for understanding aircraft limits. Formation flying demonstrated trust and synchronicity. Evasive maneuvers taught the mental discipline necessary under life-threatening conditions. In Korea and Vietnam, Carr applied the same philosophy in active combat. Over mountainous terrain and urban landscapes, in the blazing heat of Vietnam and the sub-zero conditions of Korea, he applied tactical ingenuity. Each engagement was an extension of his wartime experience. Anticipate the unexpected, analyze variables in real time, and execute with precision, whether in AP-51, F-86 Sabre, or F-100 Super Sabre. Carr's adaptability across technology, strategy, and theaters of war was a blueprint in the study of aerial leadership, proving that raw skill alone was insufficient. Intellect, preparation, and courage were equally essential. Carr's personal reflections on flight reveal a deep psychological understanding of risk and potential. In interviews, he often described decision-making as a spectrum rather than a binary of success or failure. The stolen German fighter, for instance, was never about recklessness but about evaluating probabilities, constraints, and opportunities in an environment where conventional logic dictated surrender. Every action, from operating an unfamiliar cockpit to belly landing under fire, involved an assessment of physics, enemy behavior, terrain, and his own physiological capacity. This cognitive model, seeing challenges as multifaceted equations to be solved rather than threats to be avoided, became a hallmark of Carr's legacy. It influenced not only tactical doctrines for future pilots, but also the conceptual understanding of human performance under extreme stress. Pilots trained under Carr or inspired by his career learned to approach combat with analytical creativity, balancing instinct with study, courage with calculation, and opportunity with prudence. The human aspect of Carr's story is equally compelling. Despite the lethal environment of aerial warfare, he maintained profound empathy for his comrades and respect for enemy aviators. During the strafing missions and dogfights over Normandy, Germany, and Czechoslovakia, he made choices that prioritized the survival of wingmen without sacrificing mission objectives. His leadership was characterized by the unusual combination of audacity and responsibility. He would lead attacks into overwhelming odds, but ensure his team could survive to fight another day. This balance, evident in the April 2nd engagement against 60 enemy fighters, exemplifies a rare form of leadership in combat, a capacity to inspire courage while managing risk and maintaining tactical advantage. Fellow pilots remembered him not only for his skill, but for his composure under pressure, his strategic clarity, and his capacity to transform seemingly impossible situations into achievable victories. Bruce Carr's death on April 25, 1998, in St. Cloud, Florida, marked the conclusion of a remarkable life. At 74, he succumbed to prostate cancer, but his legacy transcends the temporal confines of mortality. Buried in Arlington National Cemetery, Section 64, grave 6922, among heroes of every American conflict since the Revolution, his headstone lists rank, wars, and decorations. What it cannot list: the stolen FW190, the 4 days surviving behind enemy lines, the daring belly landing, and the audacious attacks against superior forces, lives in stories, in history books, in the memories of comrades, and in the conceptual framework of military aviation. Carr's life illustrates the difference between recorded history and lived history, between what is documented and what is extraordinary. His story reminds us that heroism is not only in victories and decorations, but also in the choices made when circumstances seem insurmountable, when conventional wisdom offers surrender, and yet human ingenuity and courage choose another path. Ultimately, Bruce Carr's life was defined by the question he constantly posed to himself: what else can I do? This simple inquiry shaped his career and philosophy. From a 15-year-old farm boy in Union Springs, New York, flying a local crop duster, to a decorated ace in 3 wars and a mentor to generations of pilots, Carr embodied the principle of exploring limits, challenging assumptions, and executing with precision. His story is more than a chronicle of missions, kills, and medals. It is an enduring lesson in human capability, resilience, and audacity. In November 1944, in a frozen Czechoslovakian forest, he looked at a German fighter and saw opportunity. In April 1945, he faced 60 enemy fighters and chose to engage. 50 years later, he flew over a crowd of spectators in a P-51 Mustang, still testing the limits of both man and machine. Bruce Carr's legacy is timeless, a narrative of courage, intellect, and the relentless pursuit of mastery that continues to inspire pilots, historians, and anyone who seeks to understand the art of possibility in the face of impossible odds.